Ambassador Kethril stood on the observation deck of his flagship and watched the blue planet grow larger in the viewing screen. His four eyes narrowed with the kind of satisfaction that came from knowing exactly how the next few hours would unfold. The humans would see the Volanthi fleet, and they would understand their place in the galaxy. The Volanthi Collective had conquered 17 star systems over the past 10,000 years. They had brought countless species under their protection. Some had joined willingly after seeing the magnificent crystal ships that the Volanthi grew from living minerals. Others had needed more convincing. But all of them had eventually accepted that the Volanthi were superior. Ambassador, his aide Yenthi called out from across the bridge. We are entering the outer boundary of their solar system. Should I signal the rest of the fleet to form the sacred pattern? Kethril clicked his mandibles in approval. The sacred pattern was a formation that had been used for 3,000 years. 7 ships would arrange themselves in a perfect geometric shape. Each vessel was a kilometer of shimmering biocrystal that had been grown over 200 years. When light hit them at the right angle, they created rainbows that stretched across the void of space. It was beautiful beyond words, and it showed any watching species what true civilization looked like. Yes, Kethril said. Let them see what awaits them if they choose wisely. Let them understand what they could become part of. The fleet moved into position with the grace of dancers. The eternal radiance took the center spot as was proper for the ambassador's vessel. Around it, the other 6 ships spread out like the petals of a flower opening to greet the sun. Their crystalline hulls caught the distant starlight and transformed it into cascading colors that painted the darkness. Kethril felt pride swell in his chest. His species had achieved so much. They had unlocked the secrets of faster-than-light travel before most species had learned to use fire. They had mapped half the galaxy and found it wanting. Every civilization they encountered was either too primitive to matter or too weak to resist. The humans were no different. Volanthi intelligence officers had been watching Earth for decades. They knew that humanity had only achieved faster-than-light travel about 200 years ago. In the grand scale of galactic history, there was barely a heartbeat. They were infants taking their first steps while the Volanthi had been running marathons for millennia. Open a communication channel, Kethril commanded. He had prepared a speech for this moment. It would explain the benefits of becoming a protectorate of the Volanthi Collective. Protection from hostile species, access to trade routes that spanned a quarter of the galaxy, and the chance to learn from a civilization that had existed for longer than humans. Had been walking upright the communication. Officer touched her console and the channel opened with a soft chime. Attention, people of Earth. Kethril began, his voice carrying the weight of authority that came from representing an empire. I am Ambassador Kethril of the Volanthi Collective. We come to you in peace and with an offer of friendship. Look upon our vessels and see what heights civilization can reach. We wish to discuss your future among the stars. He paused for effect. In his experience, most species needed a moment to compose themselves after seeing the fleet and hearing such an address. Some had wept. Others had immediately begun transmitting messages of surrender and gratitude. One species had simply gone silent for 6 hours before responding with a plea to be accepted. The human response came quickly, much faster than Kethril had expected. Welcome to the Sol System, Ambassador Kethril. This is Earth Orbital Command. We acknowledge your presence and your offer of communication. Please hold your current position while we arrange a proper reception. We are sending an escort to guide you to our diplomatic station. Kethril's mandibles clicked in a pattern that indicated amusement. An escort, how delightful. The humans thought they could impress the Volanthi with whatever primitive vessels they had managed to build in their short time among the stars. They are sending an escort, Yenthi said with similar amusement in her voice. Should we wait for them, Ambassador? Or should we proceed to the planet directly? We will wait, Kethril decided. It would be rude to ignore their gesture. Besides, I am curious to see what they consider worthy of escorting us. It will give us a measure of their capabilities before negotiations begin. The waiting gave Catherall time to review what the collective knew about humanity. They were a young species, but a surprisingly energetic one. In just 2 centuries of space travel, they had established colonies on over 40 worlds. They had built stations and outposts throughout their region of space. They traded with several minor species and had even fought a few small wars. None of this impressed Catherall. The Volanthi had done all of this and more in their first century among the stars. Humans were following a well-worn path that countless species had walked before them. Some of those species still existed as members of the collective. Others had vanished into the long night of extinction. The difference between the 2 outcomes usually came down to wisdom. Species that recognized Volanthi superiority and accepted their place thrived. Those that resisted did not. Ambassador, Yenti said suddenly, her voice carrying a note of confusion that made Catherall turn to look at her. I am detecting something strange on our sensors. Define strange. Gravitational anomalies. Multiple points throughout the system. They are appearing and disappearing at random intervals. Yenti touched her console several times, her movements becoming more frantic. This does not make sense. Our instruments must be malfunctioning. Catherall walked over to look at her readings. She was right. The sensor data showed fluctuations that should have been impossible. It was as if something was bending space itself in ways that violated the fundamental laws of physics. Run a diagnostic on the sensor array, he ordered. I already have, Ambassador. The sensors are functioning perfectly. Whatever we are detecting is real. Before Catherall could respond, another message came through from Earth. Volanthi Fleet, please be advised that your escort has arrived. The HSV Consequence will guide you to the diplomatic station. Please follow their instructions and do not be alarmed by their drive signatures. We have been informed that first contact species sometimes find them unsettling. Catherall looked at the viewing screen and saw nothing but empty space and distant stars. Where is this escort? He asked. I see no vessels approaching. The words had barely left his mouth when reality itself began to tear apart in front of them. The stars warped and twisted as if they were painted on cloth that some giant hand was pulling. A darkness opened in the void, deeper than any shadow. And from that darkness, something began to emerge. Catherall felt his 3 hearts stop beating for a moment in all his years of service to the collective. In all the species he had encountered and the wonders he had witnessed, he had never seen anything like what now hung in space before him, and for the first time in his long life. Ambassador Catherall of the Volanthi Collective felt very small indeed. The ship that emerged from the tier in space was nothing like anything the Volanthi had ever encountered. It was not just dark. It was the absence of light itself. Every photon that touched its hull seemed to vanish as if the vessel was eating the very essence of illumination. It hung in the void like a wound in reality, and it was enormous. Catherall tried to speak, but no words came. He could only stare at the monstrosity before him. His mind refused to accept what his 4 eyes were showing him. The Eternal Radiance, his flagship, the pride of the Volanthi fleet, could have fit inside what appeared to be just one of the human ship's forward sections. By the ancient stars, Yenti whispered beside him, her voice trembling in a way Catherall had never heard before. Ambassador, the readings. I cannot make sense of the readings. What do they say? The ship is not generating a normal energy signature. It is bending space around itself in ways that should not be possible. Our sensors cannot determine its exact size because the space it occupies keeps shifting. Yenti's manipulator arms were shaking as she worked her console. An ambassador, that is not the only anomaly. I am detecting more tiers forming throughout the area. Catherall turned back to the viewing screen. just in time to see reality split open in 5 more places. From each tier emerged another human vessel, and each one was different from the last one. Ship was all angles and sharp edges, like someone had taken geometry and turned it into a weapon. Its surface reflected no light at all and seemed to cut through space rather than travel through it. Another vessel was wrapped in what appeared to be living lightning. Plasma storms danced across its hull in patterns that suggested deliberate control rather than chaos. A third ship was massive and industrial, bristling with structures and towers that the Volanti sensors could not identify. This is the HSV consequence. A human voice came through the communication channel, calm and professional as if this was all perfectly normal. Volanti fleet, please fall into formation behind us. We will proceed to the diplomatic station at a comfortable pace. Our navigators have plotted a course that will avoid any areas of spatial distortion. Catherall finally found his voice. This is Ambassador Catherall. We acknowledge your transmission. Before we proceed, perhaps you could explain the nature of your vessels. Our sensors are having difficulty interpreting what we are seeing. There was a pause on the other end. When the human spoke again, there was a hint of what might have been amusement in their voice. Of course, Ambassador. The consequence uses what we call a fold drive. We do not travel through space in the traditional sense. We convince space to fold itself so that 2 distant points become one. The visual distortions you are seeing are a side effect of the drive's passive systems. Catherall felt his legs grow weak. Convincing space to fold itself. The Volanti had theorized about such technology for thousands of years. They had declared it impossible based on every known law of physics. Yet here was a species that had been traveling among the stars for only 2 centuries. And they had made the impossible into something so routine that they used it. For escort duties, he needed to regain control of this situation. He needed to show the humans that the Volanti were not to be dismissed. They had come here to demonstrate their superiority, and despite this impressive display, Catherall refused to believe that humans had surpassed them in every way. Your ships are impressive, he said carefully, but the Volanti have capabilities that may interest you as well. Perhaps a small demonstration would help establish the basis for our negotiations. We would be honored to witness Volanti technology in action, the human replied. Catherall turned to his navigation officer. Execute a micro-jump. Standard demonstration distance. Let them see what we can do. The micro-jump was the pride of Volanti engineering. It allowed a ship to disappear from one location and reappear at another almost instantaneously. The distance was limited compared to their main faster-than-light drive, but the speed was unmatched by any other known species. It was the ability that had won them countless battles and awed countless civilizations. The eternal radiance hummed with power as the jump drive activated. For a single heartbeat, the ship existed in 2 places at once. And then it was 30,000 kilometers away, appearing in a flash of crystalline light that scattered rainbows across the void. Micro-jump complete. The navigation officer announced with obvious pride. Catherall waited for the humans to respond. Surely they would be impressed by this display. Surely they would recognize that the Volanti had technological wonders of their own. The response came after a long moment. That was remarkable, Ambassador. Your drive appears to use quantum tunneling, enhanced by some form of crystalline matrix. We experimented with similar technology about 150 years ago. It is elegant and efficient for short-range travel. Truly beautiful to witness. 150 years ago, the humans had experimented with this technology and moved on to something else. Something that allowed them to fold space like paper. Something that let them tear holes in reality and step through them as easily as walking through a door. Ambassador, Yenti said quietly, our sensors have finished analyzing the human escort fleet. I need to show you something. Catherall walked over to her console on unsteady legs. The display showed energy readings from the human vessels, and the numbers made no sense. Each ship was outputting more power than the entire Volanti home fleet combined. And according to the sensors, they were all running in what appeared to be an idle state. This cannot be accurate, Kethral said. I have checked the readings 4 times, Ambassador. They are accurate. And there is more. Yenti highlighted a portion of the data. The consequence is not even their largest vessel. According to energy signatures we are detecting from further in the system, there are ships stationed near their outer planets that dwarf even this. 1. Kethral closed his 4 eyes and tried to think. Nothing about this encounter was going the way he had planned. The Volanthi had come to offer protection to a primitive species. Instead, they had found something that defied explanation. A young civilization that had somehow leaped past them technologically in ways that should have taken millions of years. Ambassador, the human voice came through again. We are ready to proceed whenever you are. The diplomatic station is looking forward to hosting you. They have prepared refreshments that should be compatible with Volanthi biology. And the station commander asked me to tell you that she is very excited to learn about your crystalline ship technology. She says she has never seen anything quite like it. Kethral opened his eyes and stared at the dark shape of the consequence hanging in space before him. The humans were not mocking him. There was genuine interest in their voice when they spoke of Volanthi technology. They truly did find the crystal ships fascinating. Even though their own vessels were clearly far more advanced, perhaps this encounter was not going to be what he had expected. Perhaps the speech about protectorate status would never be given. But Kethral was old, and he had not survived this long by being unable to adapt to new realities. We are ready to proceed, he said. Lead the way. The tier in space opened again before the consequence, and the human ship glided into it as if entering a doorway. Behind it, the Volanthi fleet followed, their crystalline beauty seeming almost quaint next to the impossible darkness of humanity's creation. Kethral wondered what other surprises awaited them at the diplomatic station. The diplomatic station hung in orbit around a pale moon, and at first glance it seemed almost normal. It had the ring-shaped design that many species favored for orbital habitats. It had docking ports and communication arrays, and all the features one would expect from such a structure. But then Kethral looked closer, and he felt his heart skip again. The station was built around a sphere of absolute darkness at its center. It was similar to the darkness of the consequence, but somehow denser, more concentrated. And the space around that sphere was wrong in ways that made Kethral's eyes hurt to look at. Light bent toward it and stretched into strange shapes before being swallowed. What is that? He asked no one in particular. Enthi answered anyway, her voice carrying the hollow tone of someone who had given up trying to make sense of what she was seeing. According to our sensors, it appears to be a contained singularity. A black hole, Ambassador. They have built their station around a captured black hole. Kethral said nothing. What could he say? The Volanthi had always believed that black holes were forces of destruction that could never be tamed. They avoided them when plotting travel routes and warned younger species to do the same. Yet humans had somehow captured one and turned it into what appeared to be a power source for their diplomatic facility. The docking process went smoothly, guided by human traffic controllers who spoke with the calm efficiency of people for whom this was just another day. Volanthi vessels locked into the crystal-compatible ports that the humans had somehow prepared in advance. An atmosphere was equalized to allow the aliens to breathe comfortably. Liz walked through the airlock with Yenti beside him and found a human waiting for them in the corridor beyond. She was smaller than he had expected. Most species that built such impressive technology tended toward large physical forms. But this human was barely taller than Yenti. With dark hair pulled back from a face that wore a welcoming smile, Ambassador Kethral, she said. Extending one of her manipulator limbs, and what he had learned was a human greeting gesture. "I am Commander Chun. Welcome to Station Unity. We are honored to have the Volanthi Collective as our guests." Catherall touched her hand briefly with one of his own manipulators, completing the greeting ritual. "Thank you, Commander Chun. I must admit that our journey here has been full of surprises. Your technology is far beyond what we expected to find." Chun's smile widened slightly. "We get that reaction often. Please, let me show you to the diplomatic chambers. The station commander and several other officials are eager to meet you. But first, perhaps you would like a brief tour." Many visitors find it helps them adjust. Adjust was an interesting word choice, Catherall thought. It suggested that the humans knew exactly how disorienting their technology was to other species, and that they had developed ways to help newcomers cope with the shock. "A tour would be appreciated," he said. They walked through corridors that were surprisingly warm and welcoming. The walls were decorated with images of planets and stars, with art from what appeared to be many different cultures. Catherall saw paintings and sculptures in styles he did not recognize, and he realized that humanity must have absorbed influences from the species they had encountered over the centuries. "You have traveled far since you first left your world," he observed. "We have," Chun agreed. "Though we do not think of it as traveling. We think of it as exploring, finding new things to learn, new friends to make, new challenges to overcome, and new enemies to defeat." Chun's expression shifted slightly, becoming more thoughtful. "Sometimes, though we prefer to turn enemies into friends when we can. It does not always work, but we try." They passed a large window that looked out into space, and Catherall stopped to stare. The view showed a portion of the human fleet that he had not seen during their approach. Ships of every size and configuration filled the void, from small patrol craft to vessels that rivaled the Consequence in size. And beyond them, barely visible against the stars, was something so large that his mind initially refused to process it. "What is that?" he asked, pointing toward the distant shape. Chun followed his gesture and nodded. "That is the Hammer of Dawn, our current flagship. It was completed about 30 years ago and serves as the mobile command center for the defense fleet." "How large is it?" "Approximately 800 kilometers in length. It carries a crew of 2 million and can operate independently for up to 50 years without resupply." Catherall felt dizzy. The largest Volanthi vessel ever built was 12 kilometers long, and it had taken 400 years to grow. The humans had built something nearly 70 times larger in just a few decades, and they spoke of it as casually as one might mention a shuttlecraft. "How?" he finally managed to ask. "Your species has only been among the stars for 200 years. How have you achieved so much so quickly?" Chen was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke, her voice had lost some of its earlier warmth. "We had help at the beginning. A species called the Rothani made contact with Earth about 210 years ago. They gave us faster-than-light technology and invited us to join their federation as a junior member. I have not heard of the Rothani. You would not have. They do not exist anymore." Catherall felt a chill run through him. What happened to them? "They tried to control us. They gave us technology but put limiters on it. They allowed us to travel to certain systems but forbade us from going to others. They treated us like children who could not be trusted to make our own decisions." Chun turned to face him directly, and her eyes held something old and hard despite her young appearance. "Humans do not accept limits that others place on us. We never have. When we learned that the Rothani were deliberately holding us back, keeping us weak so that we would always depend on them, we removed those limits ourselves." "You went to war with them?" "We did not want to. We asked them to treat us as equals, to share their knowledge freely and let us grow at our own pace. They refused. They sent a fleet to put us back in our place." Chun's smile returned. but now it carried an edge that made Kethral very aware of how small humans were and how little that seemed to matter. Their fleet did not return home. And when we reached the Rathani homeworld, we gave them one final chance to change. They chose to fight instead, and you destroyed them. We destroyed their ability to threaten us or anyone else. The surviving Rathani live on a nature preserve world now. We take care of them, make sure they have everything they need. We are not cruel, Ambassador, but we do not forget, and we do not allow those who would cage us to hold the keys. Kethral thought about the speech he had prepared, the one about protectorate status and protection and knowing their place. He thought about how close he had come to delivering it, and he felt a cold sweat form on his skin. I believe, he said carefully, that my original purpose in coming here may need to be reconsidered. Chan's expression softened. Most visitors reach that conclusion. Come, Ambassador. Let me introduce you to people who can explain what we actually want from the Volanthi. I think you will find it more pleasant than you expect. She continued walking down the corridor, and Kethral followed, his mind racing with new calculations about what this meeting might mean for the future of his people. The diplomatic chamber was a large circular room with a domed ceiling that displayed a live image of the galaxy. Stars and nebulae swirled overhead in slow motion, and Kethral found it strangely calming after the shocks of the past few hours. Several humans sat on one side of a curved table, and they gestured for the Volanthi delegation to take seats across from them. At the center of the human group sat an older woman with gray hair and lines on her face that spoke of many years of difficult decisions. She wore a simple uniform without decoration, but the way the others deferred to her made her importance clear. Ambassador Kethral, she said, her voice warm but carrying an unmistakable weight of authority. I am President Vasquez of the United Earth Government. On behalf of humanity, I welcome you to Station Unity. Kethral inclined his head in the formal Volanthi gesture of respect. Thank you, President Vasquez. I must confess that this meeting is not proceeding as I anticipated. I came here with certain assumptions about humanity that have proven to be incorrect. You came here to offer us protection, Vasquez said. It was not a question. Yes. The Volanthi Collective has brought many species under our guidance over the millennia. We believed that humanity, being so young among the stars, would benefit from our experience and resources. Vasquez nodded slowly. We appreciate the thought, Ambassador. Truly we do. It takes courage to reach out to an unknown species with an offer of friendship, even when that offer comes with strings attached. Kethral felt his face flush with embarrassment. The humans knew exactly what the Volanthi had intended. They had probably known from the moment the fleet entered their system. However, Vasquez continued, we have a different kind of proposal in mind. One that I think will interest you more than you might expect. She touched a control on the table, and the image on the domed ceiling changed. Instead of the beautiful spiral of the galaxy, it now showed a map with large sections marked in red. The red areas formed a rough sphere near the galactic core, and as Kethral watched, he could see that sphere slowly expanding outward. Why is this? He asked. We call it the silence, Vasquez said, and her voice had grown heavy with something that might have been grief or fear or both. It has been spreading from the galactic core for approximately 50,000 years. Every system it touches goes dark. No signals come out. No ships return. Any probes we send in are simply gone. Kethral studied the map with growing unease. How many civilizations have been affected? Based on historical records and archaeological evidence from systems on the edge of the expansion, we estimate that the silence has consumed approximately 400 intelligent species. Some were primitive cultures that had barely discovered fire. Others were advanced empires that had existed for millions of years. All of them are gone now, erased as if they never existed. What is causing it? We do not know, Vasquez admitted. We have theories based on the limited data we have gathered. It might be a weapon created by some ancient civilization that has grown beyond their control. It might be a natural phenomenon that we do not understand. It might be something else entirely, something so far beyond our comprehension that we cannot even categorize it, whatever it is. Commander Chun added, "It does not negotiate. It does not conquer. It simply erases. And it is coming this way. At its current rate of expansion, it will reach Volanthi space in approximately 15,000 years. It will reach human space in about 12,000. Catherall felt cold, despite the comfortable temperature of the room. 15,000 years seemed like a long time, but for a species that planned in terms of millennia, it was barely a few generations away. Why are you telling us this?" he asked. Vasquez leaned forward. "Because we have spent the last 60 years preparing to fight it. Every ship you have seen, every piece of technology we have developed, has been designed with one purpose in mind: stopping the silence before it can consume everything. You think you can fight something that has destroyed 400 civilizations? We think we have to try. And more importantly, we think we cannot do it alone." Vasquez gestured toward the star map. "Humanity has made incredible progress in a short time, but we are still just one species. Our ships are powerful, but the silence is vast. We need allies, Ambassador. Not subjects, not protectorates, not junior partners. We need equals who will stand beside us and fight for the survival of all life in this galaxy." Catherall sat in silence for a long moment. He thought about his people, about their long history and their proud traditions. He thought about the crystal ships that had taken centuries to grow, and the 17 star systems they had brought under their guidance. All of it seemed small now, small and fragile in the face of something that had been erasing civilizations for 50,000 years. "The Volanthi Collective has never been anyone's ally," he said finally. "We have always been the ones offering protection, not the ones seeking it." "We are not offering you protection," Vasquez said gently. "We are offering you a chance to help protect everyone. Your crystal ships have capabilities that ours do not. Your bioengineering knowledge could help us develop technologies that we have not even imagined. And your experience with bringing different species together could be invaluable in building the kind of alliance we need. You want us to join you as partners. We want everyone to join us as partners. The Volanthi, the dozen other spacefaring species we have contacted over the past few decades, and anyone else who is willing to stand against the darkness." Vasquez stood and walked around the table to stand before Catherall. "Ambassador, I will be honest with you. Humanity was not always kind. Our history is full of wars and cruelty and mistakes that cost millions of lives. But we have learned from those mistakes, at least some of them. And the most important lesson we learned is that no one survives alone." She extended her hand in the human greeting gesture. "The Volanthi came here to offer us a leash dressed in silk. We are offering you something different. We are offering you a handshake and a chance to help save the galaxy." Catherall looked at her hand, then at the star map above with its spreading red stain. He thought about what the humans had accomplished in 200 years. He thought about what they might accomplish in 12,000 years if they survived that long. And he thought about what his own people might become if they had partners instead of subjects. "I cannot make this decision alone," he said. "I must consult with the Collective Council. But I can tell you this. I will argue in favor of your proposal. I will tell them what I have seen here and what you have told me. And I will make them understand that the universe is larger and more dangerous than we ever imagined." Vasquez smiled. "That is all we can ask. And while you are making your decision, perhaps you would like to see more of what we have built. We have research facilities that I think your scientists would find fascinating. I would like that very much, for the first time since entering the human system." Cathral felt something other than shock and humility. He felt hope, fragile and uncertain, but real nonetheless. Perhaps the galaxy did not have to end in silence. Perhaps there was still time to write a different ending. He extended his manipulator arm and touched the human president's hand. It was warm and small and surprisingly strong. "Partners," he said, testing the word. It felt strange in his mouth, but not unpleasant. "Partners," Vasquez agreed. 3 months passed before Cathral returned to the Sol system. 3 months of heated debates and shocked silences and arguments that had lasted for days without pause. The Volanthi Collective Council had not been easy to convince. They had ruled the stars for 10,000 years. And the idea of becoming partners instead of leaders had been difficult for many of them to accept. But in the end, the images Cathral had brought back had spoken louder than any words. The recordings of human ships tearing holes in reality. The data showing power outputs that dwarfed anything the Volanthi had ever built. And most importantly, the star map with its spreading red stain of silence creeping ever closer to everything they had built. The council had voted, and the decision had been made. Cathral stood once again on the observation deck of the Eternal Radiance as it entered human space. But this time, he was not alone. Behind him came not 7 ships, but 70, the largest Volanthi fleet ever assembled outside their home system. Crystal vessels of every size and configuration, carrying scientists and engineers and diplomats and soldiers, all of them ready to begin a new chapter in their species' history. "Ambassador," Yenthi said from her station, "we are receiving a transmission from Earth Orbital Command." "Let me hear it." The human voice that filled the bridge was warm and welcoming. "Volanthi Fleet, this is Earth Orbital Command. Welcome back, Ambassador Cathral. We have been expecting you. A delegation is waiting at Station Unity to begin the formal integration process. President Vasquez asked me to tell you personally that humanity is honored by your decision." Cathral felt his heart swell with an emotion he could not quite name. It was not pride, exactly, though there was some of that. It was something closer to excitement. The feeling of standing at the beginning of something vast and new and full of possibility. "Please inform President Vasquez that the Volanthi Collective is equally honored," he replied. "We come not as conquerors or protectors, but as partners. Let us build something together that neither of our peoples could build alone." The formal ceremonies took place on Station Unity over the course of a week. There were speeches and documents and symbolic gestures that would be recorded in the histories of both species. Cathral found himself standing beside President Vasquez as they addressed a crowd of humans and Volanthi gathered in the station's central plaza, with the image of the captured singularity glowing behind them. "Today marks a new beginning," Vasquez said, her voice carrying to every corner of the plaza through speakers and translation systems. "For too long, the species of this galaxy have faced the darkness alone. We have competed instead of cooperating. We have feared instead of trusted. We have built walls when we should have built bridges. That changes now." She turned to Cathral, and he stepped forward to speak. "The Volanthi have spent 10,000 years believing that we were the pinnacle of civilization. We have learned that we were wrong. Not because we are weak, but because true strength is not measured in how many species bow before you. It is measured in how many stand beside you. Today, the Volanthi stand beside humanity, and together we will face whatever the future holds." The crowd cheered, a mix of human applause and Volanthi clicking that created a strange harmony. It was the sound of two very different peoples finding common ground, and to Cathral, it was the most beautiful music he had ever heard in the days that followed. The real work began. Human and Volanthi scientists met in laboratories throughout the station, sharing knowledge and theories that neither species had considered before. The humans were fascinated by Volanthi biocrystal technology, by the way they could grow ships from living minerals over centuries. The Volanthi were equally amazed by human innovations in energy manipulation and space-time engineering. "Your approach is so different from ours," a Volanthi scientist named Torith said to her human counterpart as they examined the plans for a new type of vessel. "We work with nature, shaping living materials over long periods. You work against nature, forcing the universe to bend to your will." The human, a young man named Dr. James Park, smiled. "We do not see it as working against nature. We see it as understanding nature deeply enough to negotiate with it. The universe has rules, but those rules have loopholes. We just got very good at finding them. And what if you combine both approaches?" Torath asked, her four eyes bright with curiosity. "What if you could grow a ship from biocrystal, but power it with one of your singularity engines?" Dr. Park was quiet for a moment. "That would be something new. Something neither of us has ever built. It would take decades to develop. We have time," Torath said. "Or at least we will make time. That is what this alliance is for." As the months passed, more species began to join the growing coalition. The Thren, a race of aquatic beings who had developed unique weapons based on focused sound waves. The Korthal, massive creatures who lived in the atmospheres of gas giants and understood gravity in ways that even humans found enlightening. The Yinri, small insectoid beings whose hive minds could process information faster than any computer. Each species brought something unique to the alliance, and each one was welcomed as an equal partner. Kethrol watched the fleet grow from a viewing port on Station Unity. Human ships with their impossible drives floated beside Volanthi crystal vessels. Thren sonic cruisers flanked Korthal atmosphere carriers. Yinri swarm ships darted between them all like silver fish in a cosmic ocean. It was the largest gathering of military might the galaxy had ever seen, and it was still growing. Commander Chun found him there one evening, staring out at the assembled armada. "It is quite a sight, is it not?" she said, standing beside him. "It is beyond anything I could have imagined when I first came here," Kethrol admitted. "I thought I was coming to offer a young species the chance to serve an ancient empire. Instead, I found the chance to serve something far greater. We have a saying on Earth," Chun said. "The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Alone, any one of us might fall before the silence. But together, we have a chance. Not just to survive, but to push back the darkness and reclaim what has been lost. Do you truly believe we can win?" Chun was quiet for a moment. "I believe we have to try. Humanity has never been good at accepting defeat. When someone tells us something is impossible, we treat it as a challenge. The silence has destroyed 400 civilizations, but none of those civilizations had what we are building here. None of them had an alliance of equals, working together with their combined knowledge and strength." She turned to face him, and her eyes held that same ancient steel he had seen on their first meeting. The silence does not know what is coming for it. For the first time in 50,000 years, the galaxy is not just waiting to die. It is preparing to fight back. Kethrol looked out at the fleet again, at the impossible ships and the incredible beings and the sheer determination that had brought them all together. He thought about the future, about the battles that would come and the sacrifices that would be required. He thought about his people and the humans, and all the other species who had chosen hope over despair. "Then let us give the darkness something to fear," he said. Chun smiled. "That is exactly what we intend to do." In the void beyond the station, the combined fleet began to move, forming up into the largest armada the galaxy had ever known. Crystal and steel, plasma and shadow, sound and gravity, all united under a single banner. They were the answer to 50,000 years of silence, and their message was simple. We are coming, and we will not stop until the stars are free. The darkness had taken so much from the galaxy. It was time to start taking it back.